Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we are doing a technical deep dive into config as code. So let's start with a little bit of housekeeping. We will email you the recording of the webinar the Monday after the webinar has completed. So there'll be no requirement for you to record today's session. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes at the end of today's webinar where we'll be taking Q&A. If you can, please use Zoom Q&A function. Sometimes what we see is Zoom questions coming in through Zoom messaging. We don't always see those, so where possible, please try and use Zoom Q&A. For those on YouTube, you can use the YouTube comment section. We will try and bring that into the webinar. Additionally, we also have a community Slack, which you can join on octopus.com/Slack. If you post your questions into the webinar channel. Additionally, we have a config as code channel as well that you can join. So if you are interested in finding out more and getting involved in the feedback phase, please do join the config as code channel. So at this point, I'm going to bring in Mr. Michael Richardson. Hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Derek. It's great to be back. Did you miss me?
Always, Michael, always. That's always definitely always miss you. So today we're going to be talking about config as code and doing a technical deep dive. Do you want to chat through what we're going to be doing on the webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. We today are going to get hands-on with the new config as code feature in Octopus. We're going to invoke the wrath of the demo gods and do this on a real cloud instance. And when I say we, I mean you, because you're going to be driving the demo today. I'm just going to be heckling from the sidelines. We're going to have a look at setting up a new project. We're going to have a look at converting an existing project. We're going to go through some of the key workflows that it unlocks. We're going to talk a little bit about a few of the patterns and practices we've seen already, a little bit about the future roadmap, and then a few questions.
That's it. So what I would say here is let's jump in.
Let's jump in.
Okay, so let's jump in and what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Octopus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by showing you how you enable config as code. So in your instance, and this is a cloud instance, this is on webinar.octopus.app. I haven't opened this to the public just yet, but what will happen is I will open this after the fact. So what you come into configuration, you select features, and then what you'll see is there's a little option for configuration as code. In this instance, I've already went ahead and enabled it. So it will be disabled by default. One thing just to be aware of is this is an early access feature. And what this means is this is still in development and generally shouldn't be used in production. Michael, do you want to share some tips there?
No, that's why we put it behind the feature flag. That will be temporary. We'll remove that at some point. This is just a way, I guess, to explicitly opt into using an in-development feature.
Awesome. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a brand new project. So let's go into the project section and then select add project. I'm going to call this demo for config as code.
It's very creative of you.
Yeah, I put a lot of thought into my naming conventions for projects.
I can tell.
So from here, you've got a version control option. So again, you can opt not to use version control as well, even with the feature flag enabled. You don't have to have all projects as part of your version controlled strategy. Okay, so at this point, what happens is you're taken straight to the version control settings. You'll see this down on the bottom left-hand corner. We've got the Git repository. So in this instance, we're using GitHub, but there are other providers, isn't there, Michael?
Yeah, we support any Git provider here. You can use your Azure DevOps or your Bitbucket repos, whichever you like. The only restriction is it does need to be a Git repository.
Yeah. So in this instance, I'm just going to map my yeah, there we go. So obviously name it correctly. So I'm just going to add a README, which is a license. Come down, select my license. So what I'm doing just now is I'm creating a brand new repository. And as you can see here, you've just got that license file and the README file. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the Git URL, specify here, and then the default branch name is main. And Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the default branch here is just treated especially in a few places in Octopus. So anyone coming in to view the deployment process for the first time will see it as it exists on that branch. That default branch there is the branch that this configuration is initially going to be written onto. When creating releases, it will be the branch that releases are created from by default. Again, you can change that, but so you can select that on the release. But yeah, it doesn't map to any special branch in Git. It just gets treated a little bit special by Octopus.
And whilst you were chatting there, what I did is I went off screen to grab my personal access token from GitHub. So I've specified my username, I've specified my password, my personal access token. And then what we also have is a Git file storage directory. Michael, do you want to jump into there?
That's the path within the repository that the Octopus configuration will be written to. We've enforced that to be under .octopus. If you have a one-to-one mapping between the Octopus project and the Git repository, it probably makes sense to sit it directly under that .octopus folder. If you have multiple Octopus projects stored in the same Git repository, you'll need to sit them under a further subdirectory there, perhaps using the project name or whatever makes sense. So yeah, both scenarios fully supported.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So at this point, I'm just going to select configure. And then I'm just going to, what is that initial commit? What do you think I'm going to write, Michael?
One small step for Octopus.
I like that. I may use that the next time. So what I've done there is I've done the initial commit. So let's jump over on the newly created repository. Let's see what happens there. There we go. There's that .octopus folder. So if you come in and have, you've got to love it. So from here, you've got your deployment process. So as you can see, there's no deployment process. Why is that, Michael?
It's a brand new project, isn't it, Derek?
That's it. So what you've got here, just straight up at the top, you've got that branch switcher. So that's just something. So that's one of the things here that you can to be made aware of. And if you do want to provide feedback, you can actually, if you select the little thumbs up, this will take you to the EAP feedback form. So we are taking feedback for this feature. Michael, do you want to go into that a little bit more?
I think you've covered it. We definitely want to hear about this. That's why we're shipping this as an EAP. We want to hear how you want to hold it. What does it not do that you expect? Yeah, tell us what works, what doesn't.
So be part of the future of config as code at Octopus. That you will really help us. So obviously here I start my deployment process with a manual intervention. Michael, obviously coming from an operations background, I always start with the approval first. Where would you
lock it down
start?
with an approval as a first thing? Coming from a development background, I probably would have gone straight with deploying to production, but that's just me.
You got to love it how the differences. So what we've got here now is some instructions. So I'm just going to please check deployment. Just something nice and basic. Specifying the responsible teams. In this instance, I'm going to make it the space manager. I would be one of those people in the space manager. So up at the top right-hand corner, you've got an option here to commit. And then there's also a bit for commit details. So I'm going to put the commit details. And I'm going to put an adding in manual intervention step.
We originally always had the this dialogue popping up, but if you're anything like me, you usually have about 46 iterations before you get your deployment process to work, and the commit messages were getting less and less meaningful with each one, and the dialogue got a little more annoying with each one, so we give the option to skip straight past it and just use the default commit message too.
Yeah, always a good idea. I think like that, I get that, the first 5, 6, 7 are really meaningful. And then eventually it's just like 1, 2, or blah, blah. And yeah.
And if you're working on a branch, of course, you can just squash them all down once you merge it back in anyway and remove all of your curse words along the way.
That's it. So what I'm doing now is I'm just adding in a hello world. So I'm just going to write there we go. And close that off. And then at that point, all we're going to do is I'm going to give just the commit option this time. So in this instance, I haven't provided a commit message. So at this point, what we now have is the approval step and the hello world script. So let's jump over and have a look at the deployment process. There we go. So at this point,
Yes.
what you've got is the steps. So you've got the first step, which you can see here. So all this is you can see the action time, which is octopus.manual. There's some properties that have been printed out. You've got the run the hello world script. So at this point, you've actually got the basics of your deployment process already in source control.
And this OCL here, the schema of that, we imagine this will evolve pretty quickly to we think it's readable as it is. You can certainly make edits to it, but you'll notice a few of the keys of those properties there. They're very internally looking, and that's because they were the internal representation. But yeah, the actual schema of each of these steps will evolve pretty rapidly.
And what I'm doing just now is I'm going to make a quick update. So what I've done there, Michael, is instead of it being hello world, I've got a hello Derek script. So,
very nice.
Yeah, so you can do this in GitHub. So like, for instance, I'm just going to update deployment process.
But you're not going to make this change directly on the main branch, are you, Derek?
Do you mean people do that, Michael? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a patch. So I'm going to propose the change. And then I'm going to create a pull request. A little bit more on that just in just a moment. So what you can do is if you come over back to the project, you can come into your process again. There we go. There's the DevOps Derek patch 1. So you can have the option, but this does refresh in the background and it does happen fairly regularly. But if you don't see anything that's newly created, you have this handy little fetch button and it'll go and it'll contact the repository and grab the new branches for you. So as you can see in the main branch, we still have the hello world. And then if we switch to DevOps Derek, patch 1, there you go. So at this point, what you can do is, so Michael, what we have now is the main branch with that hello world. So you have the ability now to use the PR. So, but what you can do is you can come in and you can create a release. One of the benefits here is
you want to test this change now, right?
Yeah, that's it. So you can do it. So you can create a new release. So you can actually do it from the main branch or from that newly created patch branch.
And the key thing that this is unlocking here is you can make that change that you've just made there. That hasn't impacted the main deployment process. So any releases that are being created, perhaps in the background by your CI server that are running, that they may still be using the main branch of that deployment process, and they will run exactly as they did before. So you can safely iterate on this change, test it before, and confirm that it works before merging it in.
And you can actually see, as part of the release, you can actually see that you've got the branch actually being named there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, okay, so I think that's the new project covered off. Let's jump in and have a look at an existing project. In this instance, I'm going to use Octopus. Octopus is definitely one of my favourite projects. The main reason is it's a really good example of a live configuration. Octopus is an online pet store that you can purchase pets from, unsurprisingly. And what it consists of is a customer-facing front-end website. Additionally, what is also being deployed is a shopping cart service. So the shopping cart will hold what you have in your shopping cart, and then you have a product service. So for instance, the product service has, say, things like puppies and octopuses. And just to this, there's no smoke and mirrors here. This is a live deployment. I just want to show you this. So what we've got here is a little step at the end that prints out the URL. And if you switch this to test, helps if one moment.
I ordered an octopus on this site the other week, Derek. Can you tell me when it's going to be delivered?
Well, for the cost of them, That's a pretty reasonable cost. And one of the things is always cracking me up about this one is dogs costing $100. Like, I don't know about that. They tend to be a lot more expensive than that. So let's jump in and have a look at the deployment process, Michael. So we've got that manual intervention step because you know how much I love that. And the manual intervention step actually has a run condition. So this, what this basically does is if this is something that's manually triggered, like by myself, the manual intervention step will run. If it's done as part of the trigger where you automatically promote something to production at say 3 o'clock in the morning, then the manual interventions won't run. And as you can see here, this is specified to run only in production. So dev, test, and all other environments won't actually run for that. Keep that one for a little bit later. We will tie back into that point. So the next few steps are very similar. What all we're doing here is we're grabbing a package and we're deploying it to an Azure web app. So in this instance, what you've got is the website. You then have the product service, then the shopping cart service. And lastly, and one of the things that we've spoke about in great deal is that database. So this is all hosted on Azure. So you've got Azure SQL, you've got 3 Azure web apps which all chat to each other. And then lastly, I print out the URL. And what this all is just a multi-line script. It's mostly just because I have a terrible memory and I'm a little bit lazy. The benefit here is I can just click on the URL just to make sure that what I've just deployed is in line with my expectations.
And I mean, the interesting thing to me of all of this is that it's an existing project that has a real deployment process in it, and you can still convert it to be version controlled. This doesn't only work for brand new projects.
That's it. I think, that's the thing though, is because almost all projects are existing, right? You don't want to have to be able to have to recreate everything from scratch. And just some background on this one. This is actually something I've used Project Export Import for. So I recently did an Azure webinar. I've exported that, imported it, and now what I'm about to do is enable it from a version control perspective. But before we do that, Michael, let's jump in and have a look at that repository. So what you've got here is this is my DevOps Derek. Apologies about that picture. And then this is the Octo Pet Shop repository. So what you've got here is your Circle CI config. There's your database. There's some infrastructure bits. And then obviously
some GitHub Actions configured up there, I think. Yep.
Yeah, and there it is there. So this was when I done a GitHub Actions one back in June as part of the release. I used this repository as part of that. So again, you've got some K8 scripts, you've got lots of stuff, lots of really good stuff. But what you'll probably find is there's no .octopus folder.
Let's make one.
Let's do it. So let's jump into the project. We can come down to under settings, you'll have the version control options. There we go. Again, you've got that URL. So let's jump in, make sure that we are adding this to the right one.
Because earlier you created a new repository, but this is a more likely scenario, isn't it? You've got an existing repository for the application and you want to store the Octopus configuration in that repo alongside your source code.
That's it. I think that's the thing though, is this is what's really going to be the way forward for people. I see this as something that's maybe 95% applied to existing projects, and then something else as you bring it on, you'll probably obviously use for version control as well. Okay, so that was a nice little distraction there whilst I went off screen to get my personal access token. Again, you've got your the storage directory. So at this point,
and for this project, Derek, you mentioned earlier that it deploys 3 separate services in there. They happen to be modeled in the same Octopus project here. They could have just as easily been 3 separate Octopus projects. And in that case, that's where I think you would have subdirectories under that .octopus directory, one for each of those projects. But since it is modeled as a single project, we'll set it directly under .octopus.
Yeah, I could see that being used a lot in microservice architecture, Michael.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Microservices with like a single repository, absolutely.
Yeah. So at this point, there we go. So as you can see, you've got the EAP flag. Obviously, click on this if you want to provide feedback.
And a branch switcher.
Yeah, and there we go. So we've got a nice clean. I have pruned a lot of these branches just to make this nice and easy. So again, let's jump in and go through we should now see, here we go. There we go, there's that .octopus folder.
And this is what I like, that image before of seeing the .octopus sit beside your build server configuration and your Docker build files and whatever else, just having all that tooling sitting alongside the application source code. That's the end result, and it's really great.
Yeah, the thing I like about this as well is it gives everyone access to what the deployment process looks like. Not everyone has access to Octopus to see what the deployment process looks like. So if you're checking in your code, and you also have your Octopus configuration as code, people can see it because it's very, very readable. So what we've got here is, here's our step. So you can see that we've got a manual intervention step. There's that run condition. So you can see here that this only runs when it's done manually. And then again, you've got the next few steps, all very similar. And these are all specifying the worker pool of windows. Then again, we're deploying the product service. And then lastly, the shopping cart service. And then the database. And then what we've got down here is we're printing out that URL. So here we go.
And seeing the script body there is interesting because I find this quite powerful, because up till now, whenever you've entered a script to be run in Octopus, you had two options. You either type the script source directly into the UI, or you send it in via a package. And I really like being able to see the body of the script in the UI of Octopus, but at the same time, scripts can be quite long, have a lot of work put into them. It feels right for them to be version controlled. And this gives us the ability to have both. That script body is now version controlled, and you can still view and edit it directly through the Octopus UI if you want to.
Yeah, and here's a little tip for you, Michael. So obviously we can see it in GitHub, we can see it in VS Code, and I will show you that a little bit in just a moment. But we also have the ability to edit it straight in the user interface.
The third option.
Is it the best option though? That's really, that's the question.
I find this one really convenient. If you have small changes to make, and they're easier to make as text, don't even have to go out to the text editor. You can just make them directly through here.
Yeah. So I mean, like for instance, if you can see that there's that script. So obviously each one is in its own individual line. So if I wanted to add a fourth one, I would just add a new line there, and then I would just get cracking with my PowerShell.
Something I am confident and looking forward to seeing us do in the near future is being able to reference script files from within the same repository here as well. It will be really powerful, I think, to point outside of the deployment process file to a script that sits in that repo and run that.
Yeah, and so what I've done just now is I've actually just grabbed that and pulled it down locally. So let's have a quick look in VS Code. So here we go. So, looks like one moment. Looks like I just need to fetch origin. There we go. So pull the origin. We should see the .oc. There we go. Okay, so yeah, there we go. So you've got your deployment process. So again, you've got your manual intervention. You've got everything here that we've seen in Octopus and in GitHub. And what I'm going to do just now is I'm going to come down and I am going to make that update. So I'm just going to, obviously there is a little bit of, Derek likes to say hello to himself quite a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just right highlight and then.
Are you saying you can write PowerShell without Googling it?
Only about 5 commands, if I'm being honest.
Okay. Five more than me, so I'm still impressed.
PowerShell. Was it they say you can't take the sysadmin out of the scheme, but you can't take the scheme out of the sysadmin. Or it's a line that kind of stuck. So anyway, so what we've got here is we've got that on the main branch. Let's do a new branch. I'm just going to do update. Select the create branch. I'm going to bring my changes over. And then I'm just going to use update deployment process. Okay, so select commit to update. At this point, we're going to publish the branch. And then I'm not going to create the pull request just yet. So what we should see is we've got the repository. Let's just refresh that. So we come down, there we go, there's the update branch. Come into octopus.the octopus folder, come into the deployment process, and then we should see just at the bottom, there we go, hello world. And then, so yeah, that's great. What I'm now going to do is I'm now going to create a pull request. But just to verify exactly what's happened, let's just do a quick refresh. You'll see here that we've got the main branch at the top, this hasn't been updated. However, if we switch to the update branch, what do you know? Hello world.
But you're not going to merge this without testing it first, are you, Derek?
I wouldn't do such a thing, Michael. I am definitely going to test this. And what you do here is you can see here that, like I was showing you earlier on, this has been fully deployed. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new release. So at the top here, you've got the Git branch. So you can continue creating it from your main branch, which is your default branch, or you can test that with the new release. So in this instance, I'm going to stay on update.
The reason that update branch was pre-selected for you there was because you'd been editing that on the deployment process. So we've kind of figured it's probably likely that you want to create the release from the branch that you were just working on. Otherwise, that would have been selected to main by default.
Well, that's it. And so, actually, one thing I wanted to show off here as well is when you're deploying it, you can actually see this in the process snapshot as well.
Yeah, actually, this is neat, isn't it? Because deployment processes have always been snapshotted in Octopus. Whenever you create a release, in the background, we've taken a snapshot of the deployment process in the database. And we're still doing exactly that with config as code. We're just taking it at the point of a particular Git commit. So, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get the power of Octopus and Git together there. It was a really natural fit, actually.
Yeah, it's super powerful. And what I'm now doing is I'm going ahead with my deployment. I'm not going to take this to production, but I can confirm that this has worked. And you can also work with channels here. Michael, do you want to chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So you could have used, if you had channels configured on this project, when you created that release from that test branch, you could have used a channel that had a life cycle that prevented that release from going through to production. And we imagine that is how you would hold it in that scenario.
And that's it. So at this point, we're just deploying the database. Everything's looking good. So obviously there's the password. There we go. And then this is just going to print out the URL. And what we should see is our hello world script. There we go. Hello world. And just to go through and confirm, this has now been deployed. One moment. Obviously, Azure web apps are a bit like IIS, so take us a second to go. And then there we go. You've got your dog, your cat, your fish, and your octopus to purchase on the store.
And of course, a more realistic demo would have been having to have made 30 commits onto that branch and failing 29 times, and the 30th one succeeded, right?
Are you watching me, Michael? So yeah. So at that point now, obviously you can come in. I'm going to just come back to the one moment. So I just need to make sure. So this is the Octopus samples. In this instance, it is the same one. So I'm going from, there we go. So, and that's fine. So obviously at that point, what you can do is you could then compare, you could then go ahead with your pull request, tidy everything up, and then move and merge that change into your main branch.
And your pull request here, that branch, you've just made a trivial change to the deployment process. But the powerful thing comes, I think, when that branch might have application code changes on it as well. And you can see those sitting alongside the changes to the deployment process all in the one pull request. That's when the real magic comes, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, and treat your configuration, your Octopus project configuration, much like you do with your application code. Use PRs, use approvals, etc. Okay, so at this point, what I do want to talk about is obviously we've went through Octopet Shop, we've went through that first, the brand new project, setting that up from scratch. So we have something called Octofront. It's an internal application that we use to power octopus.com. And we've been using that for we've been using that as our, obviously, as part of our rollout as config as code. Michael, do you want to chat about this a little bit?
Yeah, this is our internal code base for octopus.com. It's and it powers a bunch of our internal sites too. And if you scroll back up to the top of this repo, this was kind of a key moment, seeing that .octopus folder again sitting next to the GitHub Actions configuration and the Docker files. I think, yeah, it's really powerful having that all sitting in this same repository now. And this is a very real world deployment process. It's reasonably complicated and iterates reasonably often.
Well, it is real world because it's what actually we use. What we've got here is a manual intervention, which you can see here. You've got disable new relic alerts. Then at that point, you're cancelling running tasks in non-production. And then from there, you then start moving into a more complex deployment. Obviously, there is quite a few steps involved, as it can get fairly complex pretty quickly. Okay. At that point, Michael, I think it's time to go back and jump into some of those patterns.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of the feature in the UI there, haven't we?
Yeah, I thought that went really good. So we've got some patterns and practices. Do you want to chat about these?
Yeah, this is by no means an exhaustive list, and we're just shipping this feature. We're really keen to see what comes out of it and learn along with everyone else how people want to hold this. But I think there's a few points here we can talk about already. The first point here is really, I guess, just our almost disclaimer. So this is a new feature and it's a pretty significant change. So this is us just saying, don't just go in and take your critical production project and switch it over and hope for the best. We don't want anyone to lose their job here. So please try this out on non-critical projects, or better yet, export a project and import it into another space or into another cloud instance, and try config as code over there and see if it works for you, both if deployments are successful and if the feature is what you want it to be. Moving on from that, so an interesting question becomes, which repository do you store the Octopus configuration in? And you saw in the demo today that Derek used the same repository as the application source code. And that's certainly what we've had in mind as we've been building this. We think a lot of the value comes from having the Octopus configuration sitting next to the code of the application that it's deploying, alongside especially all that other kind of DevOps tooling configuration. But we haven't enforced that in any way. We also imagine a scenario where it's stored in an independent repository, possibly a DevOps or release management team has their own repository where they want all the Octopus configuration stored under that because they want their own permissions model on it. They might have protected branches that they don't want anyone to merge into. So we haven't really enforced any opinions on this. It's more of a, I guess, imagination that some of the best results come from sitting it alongside the application source code where possible. So a few of the Git, I guess the way they work as metaphors, this is the power that Git lets you leverage. So treat branches as drafts for your deployment process. This is one thing that's come out that's really powerful. If you want to make a change to that deployment process, create a new branch for it, make the change there, iterate on it, deploy it, all with no risk of impacting that main branch. And this was a capability that's never been in Octopus before. Previously, as soon as you've made a change to that deployment process, it's going to be scooped up by the next release that's created. Now you've effectively got draft mode for deployment processes, which is super powerful. Likewise, something you've not been able to do before is have an approval workflow on those deployment processes. With version control and pull requests, that's what you get now. Use it as an approval mechanism. You can set up code owners on those files in Git, and yeah, leverage that power. So with variables, we are absolutely going to version control variables as well. We haven't for the first cut, and what that means is that at the moment for the EAP, if you create a new branch and make changes to your deployment process, and you need to introduce new variables as part of that, they are not version controlled, and that's an interesting seam at the moment. And one way to hold that is to use a naming convention for those variables where the branch becomes part of the variable name. So, you can imagine if your branch is named foo, you might have foo.database.config or database.config.foo, whatever you like. Just basically some sort of naming convention there we've seen play out quite nicely as an easy way to remove those variables, for example, after the branch is merged. This is a bit of a temporary convention because in the future, those variables will be version controlled right alongside the deployment process, which should be amazing. Leverage these last 2 bullet points here. This is basically saying there's no need with this feature to opt completely into one world or the other. For me personally, if I'm starting a new deployment process, I'm still going to use the Octopus UI just because that's the most where I feel most powerful creating a new deployment process. We put a lot of time into the UI to help you fall into, the pit of success. Use it. At the same time, leverage your deployment tools and practices where appropriate. Use your source code editor, your IDE for things like bulk changes. IDEs are very well optimized for find and replace. And we've already talked about using that pull request workflow. So I guess summary here, take the best of both. Don't be strictly source code. Don't necessarily be strictly UI. You can have your cake and eat it here. So do so. And that's about it. We're really interested to hear what else comes out of this as well as people start to use this for real.
I think the biggest thing here as well is this is the start of these patterns and practices.
Yep.
Please do use the feedback form. I think that's one of the key things as part of the EAP. It gives you the ability to really help us improve Config as Code for you as well as for us.
Absolutely. Help us evolve it. Yeah.
That's it. So, okay, so let's jump into the roadmap. So at this point, Michael, I'll let you tell everyone about what's happening with the rollout.
Yeah, and I can see we've got a million questions here, so I'll move pretty quickly through this. The initial EAP for this feature is going to be Octopus Cloud instances only. That's just it lets us iterate very quickly while we stabilize it. So Octopus Cloud instances only initially. This is currently rolling out now. I wish I could tell you the exact date that it was going to hit every instance. We were joking earlier tonight about longing for the days where we shipped in Big Bang and we could say the second it was available. It's rolling out at the moment, and we expect it to be available to all cloud instances sometime in the next couple of weeks, pending. That's assuming no major and on-cord pulls or issues that we hit. If you can't wait that long, reach out to us in the community Slack after this webinar. I'll drop a note in there and you can either jump into the thread or DM me personally, and we can enable it on your instance for you, if you like, on any Octopus Cloud instance. So I'm very happy to do that. This will be available to self-hosted instances, absolutely. As mentioned, we'll stabilize it first in the cloud, and some point following, hopefully pretty close on the heels of that, we'll make it available in the downloads as well. And this feature took us a long time to get to the first release of it. From here on in, just expect a steady stream of improvements to follow. We're already working on being able to create branches through the Octopus UI, centralizing the authentication, as we talked about, runbooks, variables, and of course, whatever else you tell us is important to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. So there's many questions.
Let's do it.
So I'm going to start with the YouTube question because there is only one of those compared to 49 on Zoom. Daz is asking, can VS Code support the OCL file language type/language mode?
Yeah, initially your best bet with that is to install the HCL plugin and use that with it. It works perfectly for it. We'll, in some point, ship a dedicated Octopus extension for VS Code as well, which I'm really excited to see, because can you imagine things like IntelliSense completion for environments in the deployment process? Lots of fun things to explore in that. But yeah, initially, there's no dedicated OCL plugin right now.
I really can't wait for that IntelliSense plugin. I'm going to start with the Zoom questions. We may overrun just for anyone going live. Anyone attending. So Rasmus is asking, for private repositories, is it supported to use SSH keys to access the Git repo?
No, not right now. Username, password, personal access tokens only. If SSH is important to you, please reach out and tell us so and why.
Excellent. Are you able to create an Octo account to store Git credentials?
Hey, Darren. Right now, the credentials are configured per project, but this has definitely been one of the things that has come out of the early feedback, and we are right now working on a centralized authentication place for those Git credentials. It probably won't be an Octopus account in the sense that you're referring to exists today, but it'll be the same end result. You can centrally configure those and reuse them across projects.
I know,
but not for the initial cut of the EAP, sorry. That'll follow closely.
I know that some people are creating service accounts for it just now. That does seem to be working as well. That's some people are asking about that. So can the Git file storage directory use variables to get an interpolated directory structure? That's from Matt.
It cannot right now, no, but same answer. Tell us what you're trying to do there, and I don't see any reason we couldn't make that work. That's an interesting one. That'd be fun to explore.
Awesome. Daniel is asking, is it possible to enable config as code for an existing Octopus project? I'll take that one, Michael. Yes, I just showed that off, but that's definitely something that you can do. I think, Michael, you're be careful. Obviously, make sure that you tread carefully there as well.
For sure.
Okay, so do you have to make the initial commit to the Octopus directory, or can you add files directly to the repository and merge into the required branch? Branch protection may prevent committing directly to branches such as main.
Yep, you do not have to commit directly to main. There's two options here. When you do that initial configuration, you can actually choose the branch that commit happens to, so you can put into any branch you like, or you can pick up the files yourself and drop them into that .octopus folder on whichever branch you like as well, and simply select that branch when you configure the project. Yes.
Awesome. Just a quick reminder, we are trying to get through the questions. Please use Zoom Q&A. We won't be answering any questions in the chat, unfortunately. Will the EAP be available on the server version or only cloud?
It will be available on the server version, just not for the very initial release, just while we go through that probably initial bout of stabilization and quick, rapid iteration.
Awesome. What can we expect in terms of compatibility with existing custom step templates, community step templates, etc.?
You should expect total compatibility there. All steps should work. All step templates should work.
Excellent. Is it possible to split large config as code files into smaller modules for readability?
Today, no. No, but for variables especially, we imagine that something like that is going to be really neat. I love the idea of being able to break my variables up into logical subsections and store them in multiple files. So yeah, stay tuned for exploring that. And yeah, also referencing sections of steps from another file. Yeah, I love the idea, but right now for the initial cut, no, it's all in one file.
Awesome. Will it be possible to save the scripts in the repo in an extra file to be able to develop within VS Code?
Right. I think I understand the question here. So rather than entering the scripts as source code or sending them in through a package, can you just reference them from a location in VS Code? So right now, if you enter the script in the Octopus UI, it gets written into that deployment process file. So that is sitting there in the Git repository, and it formats it quite nicely so you can edit it in VS Code. What you can't do right now is reference a separate file for the script in VS Code. But yes, we've already been playing around with a few ideas on that as well. So yeah, eventually, yes.
Awesome. Can you reference a script within the same repository as your .octopus directory instead of adding the script body inline to the deployment step file?
I think this is exactly the same question. No, not right now, but yeah, we love this idea. I think it's one of the real powerful things that comes out of this. So yeah, soon.
Yeah, and just a quick one as well. Config as code at the moment is only for the deployment process, so it's not for runbooks.
Yeah, we just descoped that initially for the release, but runbooks make perfect sense. And, most of the work has already been done to support them, because they're kind of similar to a deployment process. So 100% expect runbooks to follow soon after. In some ways, they make even more sense than the deployment process. But yep.
You know how I feel about runbooks.
Yeah, me too.
Do you need to specify the branch when creating a release from the CLI, e.g. if automated from a build server, and if not, what branch does it default to?
Yeah, good question. You do not need to specify it. You have the option to. It will default to that default branch that was entered when you initially configured version control for the project. That's one of the things that default branch brings is release creation defaults to it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Can you use one Git repo for multiple projects?
You certainly can. That location that it gets written to, by default, it puts it directly under the .octopus folder. You can absolutely nest it under further subdirectories. So you can end up with, we see this as a scenario where, say, you've got multiple services and yeah, they're all in one repo, but they have multiple Octopus projects for them. That scenario is definitely supported.
Awesome. Will the Terraform provider be updated to include the config as code settings?
Oh, yes. Yes, it will. Definitely chase us up on that one if we haven't done it in the very near future, please.
Awesome. Do you have to specify the credentials for every project, or you can tie it into a project group? I think it is per project, yes, Michael?
It is, as mentioned earlier, it is per project right now, but we are absolutely right now working on centralizing that authentication. It's, makes perfect sense.
Do you have any rough dates for GA and also the on-premise by any chance?
No, I'm not going to say dates here because they'll be wrong. The on-premise EAP will come first, and as soon as we're confident in this feature will be the time that it goes GA. And by confident, I mean, we want to be able to recommend that you should use this for every production project. That'll be the moment that we make it GA. But I'm not going to give an estimate on that, to be honest. But we're as keen for it to happen as anyone.
Where can they find the documentation for config as code?
Yeah, that will be in our docs. That will be published in the next day or so. If I was more organized, I should have published it before this webinar, to be honest. So yeah, stay tuned in octopus.com/docs. It'll be under the project section there. It's just not live right now today.
Well document, yes. So is it possible to version tenants and their configuration or only projects?
No, the projects is the unit that's version controlled. And to be honest, I don't necessarily see that changing in the near future. Tenants, maybe one day, but it's not on our roadmap at the moment. But again, please, if you have a scenario, reach out and talk to us about it.
One of our regulars, Stephen, is asking all of this OCL awesomeness for Octopus custom step templates as well, Michael.
Yes, Stephen, I know. I think things like library variable sets and custom step templates, they are the real other logical things that I think it makes a lot of sense to. Not right now, but in the future. Keep nagging us about it, please.
Awesome. Can scripts be sourced from another location in the repository rather than being sourced from a package or inline?
Yeah, I think we've covered this one a couple of times already. That will definitely come.
I'm trying to go through. Is it possible to update the branch a release uses after the release is created?
No, today, this is a really interesting one. Today you have to delete the release and recreate it. It's a bit of a philosophical one, should you be able to change the release of a branch, because doing so obviously changes eventually everything, deployment process, variables. I really like the idea of being able to point a release at a new commit. Imagine you need to make a small change to a deployment process or variable. It's a really nice way to update an existing release. but we haven't unlocked that right now. So we're very keen to hear the real world scenarios for this, and yeah, do it with some thought. So again, reach out and talk to us, please.
Awesome. What happens if you want to disable config as code?
For an existing project, there's no way back. It's a one-way operation. You can disable the feature, but any projects that you've turned it on for will stay version controlled. So yeah, again, back to that idea of being careful and testing it first.
Dan's asking about the Terraform provider. We have covered this, but is that going to be replaced, or is that something that's going to sit alongside?
No, it definitely won't be replaced by this. We see really distinct use cases for each. You know, the Terraform provider, it still makes perfect sense if you're doing things like provisioning environments with deployment targets in it. That's never going to be replaced by config as code. And you can still use the Terraform provider to initially provision projects as well. It was never a great fit for making changes to the deployment process on a project because Octopus didn't have that branch support, so you were always modifying the single version. So that's where config as code comes in, being able to edit that on multiple branches. So that was a long way of saying we definitely see the two as complementary and have no idea of this deprecating the Terraform provider.
Dan's asking if can you point multiple Octopus servers, not projects, to one repository?
There's nothing stopping you from doing that today, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it either. I'd be careful what you're trying to achieve there. It will work, but yeah, I guess dragons be there, so beware.
Awesome. Test it.
Test it. Yep.
Is there a plan for something akin to a Docker ignore or a git ignore file?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure what that question's asking. Things like when we configure our TeamCity builds, we have to go in and ignore the .octopus folder in our TeamCity builds because often we don't want the change to the deployment process to re-trigger compilation of the source code, etc. But I'm not sure if that answers the question. So if you jump into the community Slack, if you like after this, and we'll hang out in there, and if you can give any more information on that one.
Or you can also email webinars@octopus.com and we'll answer it there as well, just in case, obviously, Michael does go to his bed occasionally. Okay. If an existing step is using a step template, does the template get pushed to the Git repo also, and same applies to script modules?
No, the template itself does not get pushed to the Git repo. What gets pushed to the Git repo is just the consuming end of that in the project. So the name of the step template and the parameters and the parameter values in it get persisted to the Git repo. As Stephen was asking earlier, I think it makes sense to also be able to version those step templates eventually, but not right now.
Awesome. Ben is asking, when is branch creation coming to the UI?
We've started work on it already. The APIs are there. I think the two first things that you'll see roll out after we ship this are branch creation via the UI and centralized authentication options. So hopefully very, very soon.
Awesome. What happens when my Octopus files are faulty? Can I lint my Octopus files and show the results in the GitHub checks?
I guess so. I'm not too sure that there's a lot of faults that you can create in that OCL file where the Octopus UI will actually handle them quite gracefully. Like if you put an invalid environment in, it'll show it as a nice little orange chip that you can just remove and reconfigure. Of course, if you completely break the structure of it, the Octopus UI pretty much throws an error and says you're on your own. You have to fix this one now. So yeah, but these are just text files in your repo, so you can run any linting tools that you want across them. Absolutely.
Robert is asking, as far as I'm aware, the current deployment configurations are stored in the Octopus database. Does this supplement this or does it replace it?
This replaces it. So in this case, the deployment process will no longer be stored in the Octopus database. It will be persisted to the Git repository. And yep.
Awesome. With the ability to commit straight to the main in the UI, is there a plan for any pull request management around those commits to stop people updating the main branch directly?
Yeah, I think we don't have concrete plans for this today, but I can easily imagine adding some sort of restrictions around this into Octopus. I guess the answer right now would be to do that in the version control provider. So maybe, if it's GitHub or whatever, you could make that the account that Octopus is using to write to that GitHub repository possibly not have access to push to the main branch would probably be the way to hold that today. But I can easily imagine a world where we add branch rules into Octopus itself as well.
We're getting a lot of questions. I think we're going to do
so many questions. They're so good too.
They are. We're getting a lot about Git providers. We support any Git provider. That's correct, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. It's agnostic to the provider right now. So GitHub, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, whatever you like. The only caveat is it is Git only. So, yep.
Yeah, that is it. No source safe. You know how much I love source safe. So, are there any limitation of the config as code? For example, is there anything which cannot be stored in Git that might be required to run the project if you lost it in your Octopus instance?
Yes, the Git, what's persisted in Git today is right now is just the deployment process. Eventually it'll be runbooks and variables again, but there is other the project record itself lives still in the Octopus database. So yeah, it kind of spans the both. The Git doesn't fully encapsulate the project.
We're down to 16 questions. So how can you secure variables if they are in version control? The variables are not in version control for this release.
No, we'll save that one for another webinar because there's so many interesting things to dive into there around sensitive variables. And yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah. Dan's asking, can you specify the branch on the Octopus command line for creating releases?
You absolutely can. Yes, you can specify the branch. You can specify the actual commit if you want. And you can do this via the build server plugins as well. So they have fields on them now to select the branch. Because in many cases, what you actually want to pass through is the current branch that the build is running through. And yeah, the docs will talk about that, but 100% possible.
Yeah, you've got a few bits there, and it's already on some of our docs as well, which is good.
It's leaked through in some bits and not everywhere. Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. Ben, cloning a project currently kind of sucks. I assume this is on the roadmap already.
Yeah, it's funny. Like being able to version control this does definitely help in a way with cloning a project. Like you can pick up that .octopus folder and drop it in and point the new project at it. But yeah, I agree. It kind of sucks. And the possibilities that this opens up for cloning are pretty neat. And so, yeah, stay tuned.
Can we get reusable modules stored in a separate repo that can be used in the project repos?
Not today, not without doing horrible things with Git submodules and things. But yeah, the idea of being able to pull in files from another place is really interesting. Just not right now.
Okay, so we are just a few minutes out from the end of the webinar. What we're going to do is we are going to continue answering questions. This will be the recording that we put up on YouTube. But I just we are likely to overrun probably by about 10, 15 minutes. Just with the number of questions, we're really keen to get through all of them today to give you as much information about config as code as possible. So James is asking, how do you deal with drift between the UI and the repositories?
Yeah, these questions are pretty much setting our future roadmap for the feature, aren't they? No, the drift, there is no drift. So the Octopus server writes and reads directly from Git. So yeah, there's no drift. I guess the only thing close to this I could imagine is, I suppose, if you came in and made a change in the UI and it conflicted with a change that someone had made directly via the Git repo, the UI basically says you have to go and resolve this with your preferred merge tool. But yep, in general, it's just like you're working via the Git command line.
Is there any ability to limit the environments a branch can run against for releases? I think what they're asking is, if you select a branch, effectively using channels, can you effectively limit it to just development?
Yeah, not in a Git native way today. So you would do that sort of as we hinted in the presentation using channels today. But I think a lot of what's currently done with channels right now will kind of merge into Git as well. And you'll be able to define things like package rules there, and somehow based on the branch also define the lifecycle which will give you that. So yeah, no, right now you just do it the, I guess, old-fashioned way by when you create the release, you'd specify the channel, which user lifecycle that was only had the environments in it that you wanted it to go to.
Awesome, thanks,
Michael. I hope that answered that question. Sorry.
I think that was pretty good. Again, if you do have any questions you want, please do email us at webinars@octopus.com or hang out in the community Slack afterwards. Has there been any thought to appending the Octopus username to the commit in cases where the credentials saved with the project are more generic?
The Octopus username is appended to the commit. So the commit has both the Octopus deploy account and the user who did it. One is the author, one is the committer. I don't think we really showed that just then in the demo, but yeah, it's actually really neat. So you can see that it was done by Octopus deploy and the user that did it.
Let's have a quick look. Oh, 1 second. Yeah, let's focus on the questions. Did you already the release dates? They were asking about release dates for the Docker Linux version. That's probably going to be released along the same time once this is
exactly the same time as the self-hosted version. Yep.
Awesome. Does anything change in API integrations related to the source controlled projects data?
Yes, it does. So there are some breaking API changes once you version control a project, specifically around deployment process. As you can imagine, that deployment process API route now includes a version control segment, which includes the branch. So, most things will still work absolutely unchanged via the API. You'll be able to create releases, deploy, all backwards compatible. If you're editing the deployment process itself via the UI, you may hit breaking changes with this, which hopefully isn't too surprising given the nature of the feature.
David is asking, is there a plan to enable the scoping of variables to a branch as well as environments, roles, etc.?
We actually plan on going one step further than that, not so much scoping variables to a branch, but just version controlling the entire variable set. So there'll be a branch switcher on the variables, just like there is on the deployment process. So yeah, you'll be able to add variables on a branch. And obviously when you merge, then you don't necessarily have to merge those.
Excellent. This feature will make developing script steps outside of Octopus easy. Yeah. I would need a dry run feature where I can dry run against tenants and targets to get/export all variables and properties.
Yeah.
Effectively just a dry run deployment.
Yeah. That would be nice. I agree.
Yeah, I like
right
that.
now, I'll take that as a feature request. The best you can do right now is test it in a development environment or a test environment. Yeah.
Awesome. So would Terraform, the Terraform provider, be the recommended config as code strategy for spaces, tenants, projects, groups, etc.?
100%. Yes, we still would definitely recommend the Terraform provider for provisioning environments, tenants, all of those things that you've said there. They're a really nice natural fit for the Terraform provider because they don't tend to naturally branch. Like the idea of having a set of tenants on one branch and not on another doesn't really make a lot of sense to us. So yes.
Awesome. Alex is asking, can I set a run condition based on a branch?
Let's do all three at once. Can I set a run condition based on a branch? Yes, you can indeed. Can I reference the branch name in my scripts? Yes, absolutely. Can I use different variable sets based on my branch? Not currently, no. But as I mentioned earlier, the variables themselves will be version controlled soon enough, although library variable sets is not on our short-term roadmap, possibly further in the future, completely possible.
We're on to our last three questions. Andrew's asking, when you create a release on a given branch, is there a way or will there be a way to specify the commit it's using as well? We may want to ensure the OCL scripts being used match the commit we built the application code on our build server.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes perfect sense. You can supply the exact commit. Yes, you can supply the branch and the commit via the command line or the build server plugins. You can't supply the commit via the Octopus UI today. We'll add that soon enough. But we kind of think that's an acceptable compromise initially because in this scenario, it's probably likely that you want it to be the same build as the application code was built, which means it's probably quite likely it's been created by the build server as well. But yeah, if not, please reach out and tell us.
Awesome. Will this feature expand just deployment processes? It would be very handy to define new projects, channels, environments, variables, etc. from code as well.
Yeah, this is really interesting where you draw the line between what's version controlled and what's not. I think as we've hinted, we kind of see the project as the version controlled boundary initially. Things like tenants and environments, we haven't quite managed to make that idea fit. We'd still today recommend either creating those via something like the Terraform provider or script outside. But yeah, who knows in the future? It's not super hard to imagine either.
Last question, and this is from Ryan Ganath. We are a startup and willing to do a code deployment to quality and production using Octopus Deploy to multiple clouds, DigitalOcean, OCI, Linode, etc., via Nomad, non-container, and container. Will we be able to use Octopus Deploy for the above? Yes.
Yeah, without knowing any of your specific details, I can't see any reason why not.
I would reach out, Ryan Ganath, I would reach out to advice@octopus.com and we can definitely jump in and help you on that. Okay, so that was 58 questions plus another, so there was 60 questions there.
That was amazing.
In about half an hour or thereabouts. So I just want to just share some resources with you. If you do have any issues with Octopus, you please reach out to us at support@octopus.com. We answer about 95% of all tickets within 2 hours. If you do have some questions around licensing and how that works, please reach out to sales@octopus.com. If you have a question around how do I do X within Octopus Deploy, please reach out to our customer solutions team. That's advice@octopus.com. And you can also, you can actually see all of our webinars on youtube.com/Octopus Deploy. If you want to be notified, please do subscribe. And I hate to say it, but smash that bell button. Well, thank you so much. Sorry.
Sorry, can I just add one last thing? Sorry.
Yes.
And also come and talk to us in the community Slack Config as Code channel if you have questions that you think of later as well. We're always happy to answer them there too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And obviously, please do hang out. Thank you so much for coming along. I know we have overrun. It's not like us, but it was, we really want to get through some of those questions. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Michael as well, thank you so much for staying up so late and coming along today. We do have some more sessions coming up. We're back on the 6th, 7th and 11th of October that we're going to be talking about Kubernetes on the Google Cloud Platform. That's with Matt Casperson and Sean Cessna, our resident Kubernetes experts. And then we're back on the 3rd, 4th and 8th of November talking rollback strategies with Octopus Deploy, and that's going to be Bob Walker and Sean Cessna. Thank you, goodbye, and enjoy the rest of your day.